Have you ever taken a photo, only to look back at it later and notice something off? Something you're certain wasn't there before. For most of us, it's just a trick of the light, a faulty memory. But for Liam, it was the start of a nightmare. It all began with a single photograph he took of his new apartment. It was just an ordinary picture, a quick snap of his living room to show his family he'd settled in. The room was empty, waiting to be filled with furniture and life. That first night, exhausted from moving, he glanced at the photo on his phone before falling asleep. Nothing seemed out of place. The next morning, however, something caught his eye. He was scrolling through his camera roll, and when he saw the picture of the living room, he froze. In the corner of the frame, almost hidden in the shadow, was a chair. A worn, old-fashioned armchair that definitely wasn't his. He shook his head, blaming his tired mind. Maybe it was there all along, left behind by the previous tenant, and he'd just been too exhausted to notice it. He walked into the living room, and sure enough, there was no more chair. The room was just as empty as he'd left it. He felt a chill run down his spine but dismissed it. It had to be a glitch, a weird digital artifact. He even took another photo of the empty room, just to prove to himself that everything was normal. But that night, the mystery deepened. Before going to bed, he looked at the first photo again. The armchair was still there. Curiosity getting the better of him, he opened a new photo he'd taken that morning. It was completely empty, as expected. He felt a wave of relief. It was just a one-off glitch. He went to sleep, feeling a little foolish for being so spooked. But when he woke up, a strange compulsion made him check his phone immediately. He opened the second photo, the one he'd taken of the empty room. His heart stopped. Sir, in the center of the image, sat the same old armchair. It was no more longer tucked away in the corner. It was now positioned directly in the middle of the room, as if waiting for someone. He frantically checked the first photo. The chair was still in the corner. It was as if the chair had moved between the two photos overnight. He bolted out of bed and ran to the living room. It was empty. Completely, utterly empty. This wasn't a glitch. Something was seriously wrong. His mind raced. Was someone messing with him, hacking his phone? He changed all his passwords, ran a security scan, but found nothing. The logical part of his brain was screaming for an explanation, but the fear growing in his gut told him this was beyond logic. That day, he couldn't focus on work. His mind kept drifting back to the two photos, two identical rooms, yet the chair had appeared and moved. He decided to conduct an experiment. That evening, he set up his phone on a tripod in the living room, aimed at the center of the empty space. He started a time-lapse recording, determined to catch whatever was happening. He sat in his bedroom, door locked, watching the live feed on his laptop. Hour after hour passed. The room on the screen remained empty. Nothing moved. Nothing changed. Around 3 in the morning, his eyelids grew heavy. He must have dozed off for just a few minutes. But when he opened his eyes again, he gasped. On the screen, the armchair was there. It had just appeared. He scrambled to rewind the footage, his hands shaking. He watched the recording frame by frame. One moment, the floor was bare. The next, in the span of a single frame, the chair was just, sir. No more fading in, no more gradual appearance. It simply materialized out of thin air. A cold dread washed over him. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't a technical error. This was something else entirely. Something impossible. He was too terrified to stop the recording or even go into the living room. He just sat there, staring at the image of the chair on his laptop screen until the sun came up. The moment daylight streamed through his window, he burst into the living room. It was empty. Of course, it was empty. But the phantom image was burned into his mind. He knew he couldn't stay there another night, but he also couldn't just leave. He had to know what was going on. That day, he did some digging into the history of the apartment building. He spent hours in the local library archives, poring over old newspapers and the public records. What he found made his blood run cold. 50 years ago, his very apartment had been the scene of a gruesome murder. A man named Mr. Abernathy had been killed, his body discovered slumped in his favorite armchair. The police never found the killer, and the case went cold. The newspaper article included a grainy, black and white photo of the crime scene, and there it was. In the center of the room, surrounded by police tape, was the exact same armchair from his photos. Liam felt sick. The chair in his photos wasn't just a random piece of furniture. It was a ghost, an echo of a long-forgotten tragedy. But why was it appearing now? And why was it moving? The next night, he was a nervous wreck, but he knew what he had to do. He looked at the photo from the first night, the one with the chair in the corner. Then he looked at the photo from the second night, with the chair in the center. It seemed to be moving towards the middle of the room. He took another photo that evening, of the empty room. He went to bed but didn't sleep a wink, his eyes glued to his phone. As the hours ticked by, nothing happened. He started to think maybe it was over. But then, just after 3 a.m., the time the chair had appeared before, he refreshed his camera roll. He opened the newest picture. His breath hitched in his throat. The armchair was there again. But this time, something was different. The fabric on the seat cushion was darker. It looked wet. And sir, draped over the arm of the chair, was a man's tie. A new detail had been added. Every night, the photo didn't just change. It evolved. It was replaying something. He frantically went back to the old newspaper article. He zoomed in on the crime scene photo. Mr. Abernathy was a well-dressed man, and the article mentioned he was found wearing a sweet Andy tie. The tie in the new photo looked eerily similar to the one in the 50-year-old picture. Liam realized with dawning horror that the photograph wasn't just showing him a ghost. It was showing him the murder, piece by piece, night by night. The chair appearing was the first stage. Now, a clue to the victim's identity had appeared. What would be next? The weapon? The killer? He didn't want to find out, but he was trapped, compelled by a morbid need to see it through. The following night, he took his customary photo of the empty room. He felt like a participant in some twisted ritual. He waited, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. When he finally dared to check the photo in the dead of night, he saw the next horrifying addition. Lying on the floor next to the chair was a heavy, old-fashioned candlestick holder made of brass. The base of it was stained with the same dark, wet-looking substance that was on the chair's cushion. This had to be the murder weapon. The photo was slowly, methodically, reconstructing the scene of the crime. Liam was no more longer just a terrified resident. He was the sole witness to a 50-year-old murder, playing out in digital silence on his phone screen. He knew the next night would be the worst. The final pieces of the puzzle were the victim and the killer. He wasn't sure he could handle seeing that. He almost fled the apartment that day. He packed a bag, ready to run, and he never looked back. But a strange sense of responsibility kept him sure. Mr. Abernathy's spirit, or whatever this was showing him this for a reason. Maybe it wanted justice. Maybe it just wanted someone to know the truth. So he stayed. With trembling hands, he took one last photo of the empty living room. That night, he didn't even try to sleep. He sat on his bed, rocking back and forth, staring at his phone. At jam 3:13 a.m., he refreshed his gallery. He held his breath and opened the latest photo. It was the most terrifying image yet. A ghostly, translucent figure of a man was slumped in the armchair. He was wearing a suit, and the dark stain was spreading from a wound on his head. It was Mr. Abernathy. But that wasn't the most shocking part. Standing behind the chair, one hand resting on its back, was another figure. This one was clearer, more solid. A man with a cold, cruel smirk on his face. Liam's blood turned to ice. He recognized the face. It was his landlord, the friendly, smiling old man who had given him the keys to the apartment just a week ago. The man who was a young tenant in the building 50 years ago. The photo wasn't just a ghost story. It was an accusation. He now held the evidence to a cold case murder in the palm of his hand. He immediately called the police, his voice shaking as he explained the impossible truth. The phantom in the photograph had finally revealed its killer.